Right, I'd like to welcome Stephanie Lim to our Hear from a Peer SITR webinar. Stephanie is the secretary for Holbrook Community Society, who run the Spotted Cow Pub. And it's great to have Stephanie here to talk to us about how they raised investment using SITR through community shares. So Stephanie, I'm going to hand over to you, and you've got about 15 minutes to talk us through, tell the attendees on the webinar what Holbrook Community Society does, how you came to be, why you needed to raise investment, and I'm sure we're all keen to hear how the process of using SITR went, and your learning really that the journey went through. And then what we'll do is I'll come back to you at the end and we'll ask some questions. So over to you.
Thank you. So the Spotted Cow Public House is a village pub which closed down back in 2014. The pub was repossessed and put on the market as a development opportunity. The people in the village were completely unaware, and it went on to be bought by a property developer, and another developer bought the option to buy. We then found out as a village that this property developer had put in a planning application to build 8 houses and demolish most of the pub. And so that's when we rallied round and decided to raise community shares to buy the pub and put it in community ownership. We found out about assets of community value and listed it as an asset of community value. And we got help from the Plunkett Foundation immediately, who helped us to register as a community benefit society with the FCA. They were fantastic. They fast-tracked us, the Plunkett Foundation, onto their More Than a Pub scheme, and we were awarded a grant and an advisor. And we launched a community share offer on the 23rd of November in 2016, 10 days after a planning decision not to give change of use to the pub was made. It's fair to say that we kind of rushed things because we were very aware of only having 6 months to raise money. And we did a lot of things back to front. We started to raise the funds in the community to begin with, but funds started to dry up quite quickly, and we decided to rethink and relaunch on crowdfunder. That's at the point where we decided to get back in touch with the Plunkett Foundation, and they gave us an advisor, David Hollings, who helped us to get the standard mark and to raise shares on crowdfunder. So at that point, Dave looked through the business plan and the share offer that we'd already written, and he gave us some advice. We were keen at that point that we wanted to get advanced assurance of SITR in order to maximise our investments. And we just decided to go for the standard mark as well because we wanted that extra assurance. We hadn't decided at that point completely how we were going to manage the whole business. There were several strands to the business. When we asked the community what they wanted from the Spotted Cow under community ownership, they wanted a pub, a restaurant, a cafe as well, but they also wanted to find a new home for the village post office, which was under threat. We decided we wanted to lease out some elements of this business because we didn't feel as a community group we had the skills necessary to do it all. But at that point, I'd sent off a business plan to HMRC asking for advanced assurance of SITR that had kind of edged its bets and not decided completely what model would go down. Dave Hollings read through it and he said we needed to decide some fundamental questions, whether we were going to lease parts of the business or manage it all, and how the business would run. We had a vote and decided that we were going to lease out part of the pub, and at that point I thought that we weren't going to get advanced assurance of SITR, which would have been a real shame. But Dave gave me a bit of advice on our business plan. he said that whilst he wasn't able to give a definitive answer on SITR, and he asked a lot of his colleagues nationally, no one had come back to him with examples of a tenanted pub that had SITR advanced approval. However, our business plan showed that we had quite a lot of other stuff going on in the business, and there's a 20% de minimis for rental income for a qualifying trade in other schemes like EIS. He wasn't sure how HMRC would see it for SITR, but if we could show that in our figures, then we had a good chance. So I updated everything in our new business plan and I sent it all off to HMRC again, and I'd reached the top of the queue at that point, and they read through it and they did award us advanced assurance of SITR. We've gone on to purchase the pub. We renovated it. It took a few months to renovate, and then everything's ongoing. We created the cafe and bed and breakfast facility, which we manage ourselves. We got tenants in to run the pub part of the business, so that takes a lot of pressure off the community group, and we're able to focus on other bits of the business. And then we finally got the post office this August, because that was quite a long process as well. And our long-serving postmistress in the village was finally able to retire, and we were able to take the post office on. So in the end, we had investors, we had 260 investors in the end. We raised 292,000. We bought the pub for 275, and then we raised a loan for the rest of the money to do the renovations. I completed the SITR, the SITR certificates. That's the word I was looking for, and it were £78,000 worth of investments claimed SITR in the end. So we know who claimed, and we did those. I think that's, yeah, covers most of the points that I wanted to cover.
Okay. Yeah. So can I just ask you a question, Stephanie, about the investment? So you raised 278,000, and you took the rest. You took a loan for the top up, and you know how many people claimed SITR, which is obviously considerably less than the amount that you raised. When you put together, and I know you had some help and support, I think you've been really good at explaining the support you've got from other agencies like the Plunkett Foundation and the More Than a Pub scheme. But how did you hear about SITR? Why did you decide to use it? I mean, you said you wanted to maximise the investment. Can you just explain a little bit more about what you mean when you say that?
So I'd read about SITR, and I thought it sounded a bit too good to be true when I read about it, because you get the 30% back of your initial investment, and I just thought, well, people are bound to invest more than they initially would, knowing they'll get some of it back. And I think that definitely was the case. I heard about it through, I think it was through the Plunkett Foundation. They talked about EIS and SITR on their different. I think Sally talked to me about it, our advisor, about a way of raising more money and how to talk to those investors who might be investing a larger sum than the minimum investment. We raised shares through asking for a minimum investment of £250 and a maximum of 50,000. So fair to say we didn't get many huge investors, but we got quite a lot around the 5,000 mark, and they told us that they would have invested less. It was knowing that they could claim back 30% of their investment that made them put a bit more in.
Okay. Yeah, so we often hear about that, and I think it's definitely worth, when we start to talk about these tax relief like EIS and SITR, there's an awful lot of acronyms in there. So one of the things that we've been able to do as part of the Get SITR campaign is to produce now a simple guide to tax relief. So if any of the attendees are wondering more about what are the difference in these tax reliefs, how do you use them, when they can apply, then we'll make sure that the link to that simple guide is something that you can find easily. You talked a little bit about your business plan and about the 80-20 rule. So we always tell people that social investment tax relief can be used for trading activity. And you explained about how, despite the fact you do something that is now currently ineligible for reassurance for SITR, which is leasing, actually you are able to do an amount of that as long as you've got a varied amount of income streams. I think that's something people will probably find really interesting. When you talk about your community society and then you think of the pub, you tend to think just about the pub, but actually you've got a whole lot more going on, haven't you, in your trading activity?
Yes, so it's a whole community hub. It's quite a big building, and we lease the pub part of it, but we were very careful in our business plan that we sent to HMRC that we listed all of the other things that were going on in the business first. So that we've got a guest room, and we've got a cafe that we run, and we've also got the post office in there. So we've got all these other things going on as part of the business. And then we do charge quite a reasonable rent for the pub, which brings that trading, that activity, excluded trade activity, down to a reasonable amount. And we wanted to do that initially anyway, because we wanted to give our tenants a fair crack at kind of making a business for themselves to begin with, and then after a couple of years, after 3 years, we'd be able to increase the rent and see rewards of that. And we also we talked to HMRC about the possibility of it being more of a hybrid and it looking at more of a profit share from them. So they kind of the rules are, I think it's more of a case-by-case basis that they look at, rather than it being a hard and fast rule. And I think they looked at our whole business and said what thought this felt like a community running quite a lot of a business and leasing a little bit of it out, rather than it being just buying an asset and leasing it.
Okay, so I mean I think that's something we often say to people. That's a really good example of the fact that in order to get pre-assurance, it's all based on the information that you provide. So don't miss anything out, because pre-assurance is only as good as the information you submit, and it's much better to talk through with HMRC the scenario you're looking at, because actually you still have the option, if you like, to change or adapt your trading model if you want to use SITR, as long as HMRC believe that that's acceptable. The other question that I had for you, Stephanie, is you talked about originally starting and raising money through the community, and you said that quickly dried up. So can you just talk us through, for other attendees who think perhaps doing this using community shares, about the role of crowdfunder and how the platform helped you to raise the investment, so that we have an idea, how much had you raised before and how much did you go on? We know what the total you raised. How much do you actually raise once you were out with the crowdfunder platform?
So we started raising within the community, and we raised, I think, 30,000 fairly quickly, and then another 10 came in towards the end of that. And I think people were saying on Facebook and on our webpage there wasn't a clear route to invest, because we just put the share offer out there, and then it was the rule, the instructions were to write a check and send it in the post to my house or put it through my door. It was a lot more difficult than actually just following a web link and just clicking and pledging money. So Crowdfunder just made it a whole lot easier to invest. It brought it out to a wider audience. It meant that we focused on telling our story much more simply, because we made a short film that we were able to show, and it wasn't just a dry document people were reading. People could see the story, and it brought it to life. And then once it went out through Crowdfunder, we then managed to raise the full amount. So initially we raised just over 275 that we needed to buy it, but we've raised a little bit more since, because people have invested since then.
Okay, so that's I think that's another really interesting dynamic for the attendees to the webinar who are thinking about the 3 different ways that you can raise investment using social investment tax relief. But I think where the role of working with a platform helps is in that reaching that wider audience, because again, another thing that we have to consider is, once we're looking to raise investment in any organisation, we need to think about the financial promotions and credit brokerage rules and regulations. So instead of just being able to go out and put on your website that you're raising investment and tell everybody about it, you need to start to think about those things, and working through a platform can help you to get the message out wider, but to make sure that people really understand that this is an investment proposition that's being put before them. I know lots of organisations often find that working with a third party, you can do this directly and do it on your own, but they often find that that's helpful. And again, this is something that I know I found quite difficult to get my head round at the beginning, because when you say, oh, you have to be careful of financial promotions, I automatically thought, well, I don't really know which bit of financial promotions we have to be careful of. So we were able to publish another simple guide, and it is really easily readable, and again, it's available free through Get SITR. We'll include that link. So I think my final question that I wanted to ask you, Stephanie, is about, what are your top tips? If somebody else was in this position now, what would you give as your 3 top tips?
I'd say get in touch with the Plunkett Foundation early and try to get funding for an advisor. Get the community shares standard mark early, so that you know that you've got that you've reached a certain standard and you've got credibility to your shares, your share offer. And finally, I think it's launch once and launch well. Don't kind of do it the way we did it, where you launch once and then you have to redo things. I think just plan it carefully and do it properly with a really strong message, and do it properly and do it well.
Okay. And in terms of social investment tax relief, would you do it again? And would you recommend somebody else to do it? And was it worth the hassle, I suppose?
It was definitely worth the hassle, and I think all the people who've got their money back are amazed when they get this check back from HMRC of actual money just back to them. I think they're a bit surprised that it works. And I definitely would do it again. And I think I'd make the message a lot clearer about social investment tax relief to begin with as well. It is quite an arduous process collecting all of the names and the dates of their investments and getting it all off to HMRC, but it is worth it, I think.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.